Chapter 6 of 8 Pillars of Prosperity by James Allen. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 6 Fifth Pillar, Sympathy. The remaining pillars are the 4 central pillars in the Temple of Prosperity. They give it greater strength and stability, and add both to its beauty and utility. They contribute greatly to its attractiveness, for they belong to the highest moral sphere, and therefore to great beauty and nobility of character. They indeed make a man great, and place him among the comparatively few whose minds are rare, and that shine apart in sparkling purity and bright intelligence. Sympathy should not be confounded with that maudlin and superficial sentiment which, like a pretty flower without root, presently perishes and leaves behind neither seed nor fruit. To fall into hysterics about some suffering abroad is not sympathy, neither are bursts of violent indignation against the cruelties and injustices of others any indication of a sympathetic mind. If one is cruel at home, if he badgers his wife, or beats his children, or abuses his servants, or stabs his neighbors with shafts of bitter sarcasm, what hypocrisy is his profession of love for the suffering people who are outside the immediate range of his influence? What shallow sentiment informs his bursts of indignation against the injustice and hard-heartedness in the world around him? Says Emerson of such, "Go love thy infant, love thy wood-chopper, be good-natured and modest, have that grace, and never varnish your hard, uncharitable ambition with this incredible tenderness for black folk 1,000 miles off. Thy love afar is spite at home." The test of a man is in his immediate acts, not in ultra sentiments, and if those acts are consistently informed with selfishness and bitterness, if those at home hear his steps with dread, and feel a joyful relief on his departure, how empty are his expressions of sympathy for the suffering or downtrodden, how futile his membership of a philanthropic society. Though the well of sympathy may feed the spring of tears, that spring more often draws its supply from the dark pool of selfishness, for when selfishness is thwarted, it spends itself in tears. Sympathy is a deep, silent, inexpressible tenderness, which is shown in a consistently self-forgetful, gentle character. Sympathetic people are not gushing and spasmodic, but are permanently self-restrained, firm, quiet, unassuming and gracious. Their undisturbed demur, where the suffering of others is concerned, is frequently mistaken for indifference by shallow minds, but the sympathetic and discerning eye recognizes, in their quiet strength and their swiftness to aid while others are weeping and wringing their hands, the deepest, soundest sympathy. Lack of sympathy is shown in cynicism, ill-natured sarcasm, bitter ridicule, taunting and mockery, and anger and condemnation, as well as in that morbid and false sentiment which is a theoretical and assumed sympathy, having no basis in practice. Lack of sympathy arises in egotism. Sympathy arises in love. Egotism is involved in ignorance. Love is allied to knowledge. It is common with men to imagine themselves as separate from their fellows, with separate aims and interests, and to regard themselves as right and others wrong in their respective ways. Sympathy lifts a man above this separate and self-centered life and enables him to live in the hearts of his fellows, and to think and feel with them. He puts himself in their place, and becomes, for the time being, as they are. As Whitman, the hospital hero, expresses it, "I do not ask the wounded person. It is a kind of impertinence to question a suffering creature. Suffering calls for aid and tenderness, not for curiosity, and the sympathetic man or woman feels the suffering, and ministers to its alleviation. Nor can sympathy boast, and wherever self-praise enters in, sympathy passes out. If one speaks of his many deeds of kindness, and complains of the ill treatment he has received in return, he has not done kindly deeds. but has yet to reach that self-forgetful modesty which is the sweetness of sympathy. Sympathy, in its real and profound sense, is oneness with others in their strivings and sufferings, so that the man of sympathy is a composite being. He is, as it were, a number of men, and he views a thing from a number of different sides, and not from one side only, and that his own particular side. He sees with other men's eyes, hears with their ears, thinks with their minds, and feels with their hearts. He is thus able to understand men who are vastly different from himself. The meaning of their lives is revealed to him, and he is united to them in the spirit of goodwill. Said Balzac, "The poor fascinate me. Their hunger is my hunger. I am with them in their homes. Their privations I suffer. I feel the beggar's rags upon my back. I for the time become the poor and despised man." It reminds us of the saying of one greater than Balzac, that a deed done for a suffering little one was done for him. And so it is. Sympathy leads us to the hearts of all men, so that we become spiritually united to them, and when they suffer we feel the pain, when they are glad we rejoice with them, when they are despised and persecuted we spiritually descend with them into the depths, and take into our hearts their humiliation and distress. And he who has this binding, uniting spirit of sympathy can never be cynical and condemnatory, can never pass thoughtless and cruel judgments upon his fellows, because in his tenderness of heart he is ever with them in their pain. But to have reached this ripened sympathy, it must be that one has loved much, suffered much, and sounded the dark depths of sorrow. It springs from acquaintance with the profoundest experiences, so that a man has had conceit, thoughtlessness, and selfishness burnt out of his heart. No man can have true sympathy who has not been, in some measure at least, a man of sorrows, and acquainted with grief. But the sorrow and grief must have passed, must have ripened into a fixed kindness and habitual calm. To have suffered so much in a certain direction that suffering is finished, and only its particular wisdom remains, enables one, wherever that suffering presents itself, to understand and deal with it by pure sympathy, and when one has been perfected by suffering in many directions, he becomes a center of rest and healing for the sorrowing and broken-hearted who are afflicted with the afflictions which he has experienced and conquered. As a mother feels the anguish of her suffering child, so the man of sympathy feels the anguish of suffering men. Such is the highest and holiest sympathy, but a sympathy much less perfect is a great power for good in human life, and a measure of it everywhere and every day is needed. While rejoicing in the fact that in every walk of life there are truly sympathetic people, one also perceives that harshness, resentment, and cruelty that are all too common. These hard qualities bring their own sufferings, and there are those who fail in their business or particular work entirely because of the harshness of their disposition. A man who is fiery and resentful, or who is hard, cold, and calculating, with the springs of sympathy dried up within him, even though he be otherwise an able man, will, in the end, scarcely avoid disaster in his affairs. His heated folly in the one case, or cold cruelty in the other, will gradually isolate him from his fellows, and from those who are immediately related to him in his particular avocation, so that the elements of prosperity will be eliminated from his life, leaving him with a lonely failure, and perhaps a hopeless despair. Even in ordinary business transactions, sympathy is an important factor, for people will always be attracted to those who are of a kindly and genial nature, preferring to deal with them rather than with those who are hard and forbidding. In all spheres where direct personal contact plays an important part, the sympathetic man with average ability will always take precedence of the man of greater ability but who is unsympathetic. If a man be a minister of clergymen, a cruel laugh or an unkind sentence from him will seriously injure his reputation and influence, but particularly his influence, for even they who admire his good qualities will, through his unkindness, unconsciously have a lower regard for him in their personal esteem. If a business man professes religion, people will expect to see the good influence of that religion on his business transactions. To profess to be a worshipper of the gentle Jesus on Sunday, and all the rest of the week be a hard, grasping worshipper of Mammon, will injure his trade, and detract considerably from his prosperity. Sympathy is a universal spiritual language, which all, even the animals, instinctively understand and appreciate, for all beings and creatures are subject to suffering, and this sameness of painful experience leads to that unity of feeling which we call sympathy. Selfishness impels men to protect themselves at the expense of others, but sympathy impels them to protect others by the sacrifice of self, and in this sacrifice of self there is no real and ultimate loss, for while the pleasures of selfishness are small and few, the blessings of sympathy are great and manifold. It can be asked, how can a business man, whose object is to develop his own trade, practice self-sacrifice? Every man can practice self-sacrifice just where he is, and in the measure that he is capable of understanding it. If one contends that he cannot practice a virtue, for were his circumstances different, he would still have the same excuse. Diligence in business is not incompatible with self-sacrifice, for devotion to duty, even though that duty be trade, is not selfishness, but may be an unselfish devotion. I know a business man who, when a competitor who had tried to cut him out of business cut himself out and failed, set that same competitor up in business again. Truly a beautiful act of self-sacrifice, and the man that did it is today one of the most successful and prosperous of business men. The most prosperous commercial traveler I have ever known was overflowing with exuberant kindness and geniality. He was as innocent of all tricks of trade as a newborn infant, but his great heart and manly uprightness won for him fast friends wherever he went. Men were glad to see him come into their office or shop or mill, and not alone for the good embracing influence he brought with him, but also because his business was sound and trustworthy. This man was successful through sheer sympathy, but sympathy so pure and free from policy that he himself would probably have denied that his success could be attributed to it. Sympathy can never hinder success. It is selfishness that blights and destroys. As goodwill increases, man's prosperity will increase. All interests are mutual, and stand or fall together, and as sympathy expands the heart, it extends the circle of influence, making blessings, both spiritual and material, to more greatly abound. Fourfold are the qualities which make up the great virtue of sympathy, namely, 1. Kindness, 2. Generosity, 3. Gentleness, 4. Insight. Kindness, when fully developed, is not a passing impulse but a permanent quality. An intermittent and unreliable impulse is not kindness, though it often goes under that name. There is no kindness in praise if it be followed by abuse. The love which seems to prompt the spontaneous kiss will be of little account if it be associated with a spontaneous spite. The gift which seems so gracious will lose its value should the giver afterwards wish its value in return. To have one's feelings aroused to do a kind action toward another by some external stimulus pleasing to oneself, and shortly afterwards to be swayed to the other extreme towards the same person by an external event unpleasing to oneself, should be regarded as weakness of character. It is also a selfish condition to be thinking of oneself only. A true kindness is unchangeable, and needs no external stimulus to force it into action. It is a well from which thirsty souls can always drink, and it never runs dry. Kindness, when it is a strong virtue, is bestowed not only on those who please us, but also upon those whose actions go contrary to our wish and will, and is a constant and never-varying glow of genial warmth. There are some actions of which men repent. Such are all unkind actions. There are other actions of which men do not repent, and such are all kind actions. The day comes when men are sorry for the cruel things they said and did, but the day of gladness is always with them for the kindly things they have said and done. Unkindness mars a man's character, it mars his face as time goes on, and it mars that perfection of success which he would otherwise reach. Kindness beautifies the character, it beautifies the face with the growth of years, and it enables a man to reach that perfection of success to which his intellectual abilities entitle him. A man's prosperity is mellowed and enriched by the kindness of his disposition. Generosity goes with a larger-hearted kindness. If kindness be the gentle sister, generosity is the strong brother. A free, open-handed, and magnanimous character is always attractive and influential. Stinginess and meanness always repel. They are dark, cramped, narrow, and cold. Kindness and generosity always attract. They are sunny, genial, open, and warm. That which repels makes for isolation and failure. That which attracts makes for union and success. Giving is as important a duty as getting, and he who gets all he can, and refuses to give, will at last be unable to get, for it is as much a spiritual law that we cannot get unless we give, as that we cannot give unless we get. Giving has always been taught as a great and important duty by all religious teachers. This is because giving is one of the highways of personal growth and progress. It is a means by which we attain to greater and greater unselfishness, and by which we prevent the falling back into selfishness. It implies that we recognize our spiritual and social kinship with our fellow men, and are willing to part with a position of that which we have earned or possess, for a man who, the more he gets, hungers for more still, and refuses to loosen his grasp upon his accumulating store, like a wild beast with its prey, is retrogressing. He is shutting himself out from all the higher joy-giving qualities, and from free and life-giving communion with unselfish, happy human hearts. Dickens's Scrooge in A Christmas Carol represents the condition of such a man with graphic vividness and dramatic force. Our public men in England today, probably also in America, are nearly all, I think I might say all, for I have not yet met an exception, great givers. These men, Lord Mayors, magistrates, town and city councillors, and all men fulfilling responsible public offices, being men who have been singularly successful in the management of their own private affairs, are considered the best men for the management of public affairs, and numerous noble institutions throughout the land are perpetual witnesses to the munificence of their gifts. Nor have I been able to find any substantial truth in accusation, so often hurled against such men by the envious and unsuccessful, that their riches are made unjustly. Without being perfect men, they are an honorable class of manly, vigorous, generous, and successful men, who have acquired riches and honor by sheer industry, ability, and uprightness. Let a man beware of greed, of meanness, of envy, of jealousy, of suspicion, for these things, if harbored, will rob him of all that is best in life, even all that is best in material things, as well as all that is best in character and happiness. Let him be liberal of heart and generous of hand, magnanimous and trusting, not only giving cheerfully and often of his substance, but allowing his friends and fellow men freedom of thought and action. Let him be thus, and honor, plenty, and prosperity will come knocking at the door for admittance as his friends and guests. Gentleness is akin to divinity. Perhaps no quality is so far removed from all that is coarse, brutal, and selfish as gentleness, so that when one is becoming gentle, he is becoming divine. It can only be acquired after much experience and through great self-discipline. It only becomes established in a man's heart when he has controlled and brought into subjection his animal voice, a distinct, firm, but quiet enunciation, and freedom from excitement, vehemence, or resentment in particularly aggravating circumstances. If there is one quality which, above all others, should distinguish the religious man, it is the quality of gentleness, for it is the hallmark of spiritual culture. The rudely aggressive man is an affront to cultivated minds and unselfish hearts. Our word gentleman has not altogether departed from its original meaning. It is still applied to one who is modest and self-restrained, who is considerate for the feelings and welfare of others. A gentle man, whose good behavior is prompted by thoughtfulness and kindliness, is always loved, whatever may be his origin. Quarrelsome people make a display in their bickering and recriminations of their ignorance and lack of culture. The man who has perfected himself in gentleness never quarrels. He never returns the hard word. He leaves it alone, or meets it with a gentle word, which is far more powerful than wrath. Gentleness is wedded to wisdom, and the wise man has overcome all anger in himself, and so understands how to overcome it in others. The gentleman is saved from most of the disturbances and turmoils with which uncontrolled men afflict themselves. While they are wearing themselves out with wasteful and needless strain, he is quiet and composed, and such quietness and composure are strong to win in the battle of life. Insight is the gift of sympathy. The sympathetic mind is the profoundly perceiving mind. We understand by experience and not by argument. Before we can know a thing or being, our life must touch its or his life. Argument analyzes the outer skin, but sympathy reaches to the heart. The cynic sees the hat and coat and thinks he sees the man. The sympathetic seer sees the man and is not concerned with the hat and coat. In all kinds of hatred there is a separation by which each misjudges the other. In all kinds of love there is a mystic union by which each knows the other. Sympathy, being the purest form of this, the greatest poet, because he has the largest heart. No other figure in all literature has shown such a profound knowledge of the human heart, and of nature both animate and inanimate. The personal Shakespeare is not to be found in his works. He is merged by sympathy into his characters. The wise man and the philosopher, the madman and the fool, the drunkard and the harlot, these he, for the time into their particular experiences, knew them better than they knew themselves. Shakespeare has no partiality, no prejudice. His sympathy embraces all, from the lowest to the highest. Prejudice is the great barrier to sympathy and knowledge. It is impossible to understand those against whom one harbors a prejudice. We only see men and things as they are when we divest our minds of partial judgments. We become seers as we become sympathizers. Sympathy has knowledge for her companion. Inseparable are the feeling heart and the seeing eye. The man of pity is the man of prophecy. He whose heart beats in tune with all hearts, to him the contents of all hearts are revealed. Nor are past and future any longer insoluble mysteries to the man of sympathy. His moral insight apprehends the perfect round of human life. Sympathetic insight lifts a man into the consciousness of freedom, gladness, and power. His spirit inhales joy as his lungs inhale air. There are no longer any fears of his fellow men of competition, hard times, enemies, and the like. These groveling illusions have disappeared, and there has opened up before his awakened vision a realm of greatness and grandeur. End of chapter 6. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 7 of 8 Pillars of Prosperity by James Allen. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 7. Sixth Pillar. Sincerity. Human society is held together by its sincerity. A universal falseness would beget a universal mistrust, which would bring about a universal separation, if not destruction. Life is made sane, wholesome, and happy by our deep-rooted belief in one another. If we did not trust men, we could not transact business with them, could not even associate with them. Shakespeare's Timon shows us the wretched condition of a man who, through his own folly, has lost all faith in the sincerity of human nature. He cuts himself off from the company of all men, and finally commits suicide. Emerson has said something to the effect that if the trust system were withdrawn from commerce, society would fall to pieces, that system being an indication of the universal confidence men place in each other. Business, commonly supposed by the short-sighted and foolish to be all fraud and deception, is based on great trust, a trust that men will meet and fulfill their obligations. Payment is not asked until the goods are delivered, and the fact of the continuance of this system for ages proves that most men do pay their debts, and have no wish to avoid such payment. Back of all its shortcomings, human society rests on a strong basis of truth. Its fundamental note is sincerity. Its great leaders are all men of superlative sincerity, and their names and achievements are not allowed to perish, a proof that the virtue of sincerity is admired by all the race. It is easy for the insincere to imagine that everyone is like themselves, and to speak of the rottenness of society, though how could a rotten thing endure age after age, for is not everything yellow to the jaundiced eye? People who cannot see anything good in the constitution of human society should overhaul themselves. Their trouble is near home. They call good evil. They have dwelt cynically and peevishly on evil until they cannot see good, and everything and everybody appears evil. Society is rotten from top to bottom, I heard a man say recently, and he asked me if I did not think so. I replied that I should be sorry to think so, that while society has many blemishes, it was sound at the core and contained within itself the seeds of perfection. Society, indeed, is so sound that the man who is playing a part for the accomplishment of entirely selfish ends cannot long prosper, and cannot fill any place as an influence. He is soon unmasked, and the fact that such a man can, for a brief period, batten on human credulity, speaks well for the trustfulness of men, if it reveals their lack of wisdom. An accomplished actor on the stage is admired, but the designing actor on the stage of life brings himself down to ignominy and contempt. In striving to appear what he is not, he becomes as one having no individuality, no character, and he is deprived of all influence, all power, all success. A man of profound sincerity is a great moral force, and there is no force, not even the highest intellectual force, that can compare with it. Men are powerful in influence according to the soundness and perfection of their sincerity. Morality and sincerity are so closely bound up together that where sincerity is lacking, morality, as a power, is lacking also. For insincerity undermines all the other virtues, so that they crumble away and become of no account. Even a little insincerity robs a character of all its nobility, and makes it common and contemptible. Falseness is so despicable a vice, and no man of moral weight can afford to dally with petty compliments, or play the fool with trivial and howsoever light, in order to please, and he is no longer strong and admirable, but is become a shallow weakling, whose mind has no deep well of power from which men can draw, and no satisfying richness to stir them in a worshipful regard. Even they who are for the moment flattered with the painted lie, or pleased with the deftly woven deception, will not escape those permanent undercurrent influences which move the heart and shape the judgment to fixed and final issues, while these designed illusions create but momentary ripples on the surface of the mind. "I am very pleased with his attentions," said a woman of an acquaintance, "but I would not marry him." "Why not?" she was asked. "He doesn't ring true," was the reply. Ring true, a term full of meaning. It has reference to the coin which, when tested by its ring, emits a sound which reveals the sterling metal throughout, without the admixture of any base material. It comes up to the standard, and will pass anywhere and everywhere for its full value. So it is with men. Their words and actions emit their own peculiar influence. There is in them an inaudible sound which all other men inwardly hear and instinctively detect. They know the false ring from the true, yet know not how they know. As the outer ear can make the most delicate distinctions in sounds, so the inner ear can make equally subtle distinctions between souls. None are ultimately deceived but the deceiver. It is the blind folly of the insincere that, while flattering themselves upon their successful simulations, they are deceiving none but themselves. Their actions are laid bare before all hearts. There is at the heart of man a tribunal whose judgments do not miscarry. If the senses faultlessly detect, shall not the soul infallibly know? This inner infallibility is shown in the collective judgment of the race. This judgment is perfect, so perfect in literature, art, science, invention, religion, in every department of knowledge. It divides the good from the bad, the worthy from the unworthy, the true from the false, zealously guarding and preserving the former, and allowing the latter to perish. The works, words, and deeds of great men are the heirlooms of the race, and the race is not careless of their value. 1,000 men write a book, and only one is a work of original genius, yet the race singles out that one, elevates and preserves it, while it consigns the 999 copyists to oblivion. 10,000 men utter a sentence under a similar circumstance, and only one is a sentence of divine wisdom, yet the race singles out that saying for the guidance of posterity, while the other sentences are heard no more. It is true that the race slays its prophets, but even that slaying becomes a test which reveals the true ring, and men detect its tureens. The slain one has come up to the standard, and the deed of his slaying is preserved as furnishing infallible proof of his greatness. As the counterfeit coin is detected and cast back into the melting pot, while the sterling coin circulates among all men and is valued for its worth, so the counterfeit word, deed, or character is perceived, and is left to fall back into nothingness from which it emerged, a thing unreal, powerless, and dead. Spurious things have no value, whether they be bric-a-brac or men. We are ashamed of imitations that try to pass for the genuine article. Falseness is cheap. The masquerader becomes a byword. He is less than a man. He is a shadow, a spook, a mere mask. Trueness is valuable. The sound-hearted man becomes an exemplar. He is more than a man. He is a reality, a force, a moulding principle. By falseness all is lost. Even individuality dissolves, for falseness is nonentity, nothingness. By trueness everything is gained, for trueness is fixed, permanent, and real. It is important that we be real, that we harbor no wish to be other than what we are, that we simulate no virtue, assume no excellency, adopt no disguise. The hypocrite thinks he can hoodwink the world and the eternal law of the world. There is but one person that he hoodwinks, and that is himself, and for that the law of the world inflicts its righteous penalty. There is an old theory that the excessively wicked are annihilated. I think to be a pretender is to come as near to annihilation as a man can get, for there is a sense in which a man is gone, and in his place there is but a mirage of shams. The hell of annihilation which so many dread, he has descended into, and to think that such a man can prosper is to think that shadows can do the work of entities, and displace a real man. If any man thinks he can build up a successful career on pretenses and appearances, let him pause before sinking into the abyss of shadows, for in insincerity there is no solid ground, no substance, no reality. There is nothing on which he can stand, and no material with which to build, but there are loneliness, poverty, shame, confusion, fears, suspicions, weeping, groaning, and lamentations. For if there is one hell lower, darker, and fouler than all the others, it is the hell of insincerity. 4 beautiful traits adorn the mind of the sincere man, and these are: 1. Simplicity. 2. Attractiveness. 3. Penetration. 4. Power. Simplicity is naturalness. It is a simple being, without fake or foreign adornment. Why are all things in nature so beautiful? Because they are natural. We see them as they are, no task they might wish to appear, for in sooth they have no wish to appear otherwise. There is no hypocrisy in the world of nature outside of human nature. The flower which is so beautiful in all eyes would lose its beauty in all eyes, would nature look upon reality, and its beauty and perfection gladden and amaze us. We cannot find anywhere a flaw, and are conscious of our incapacity to improve upon anything, even to the most insignificant. Everything has its own particular perfection, and shines in the beauty of unconscious simplicity. Of the modern social cries, it is back to nature. It is generally understood to mean a cottage in the country and a piece of land to cultivate. It will be of little use to go into the country if we take our shams with us, and any veneer which we may cling to can well be washed off just where we are. It is good that they who feel burdened with the conventions of society should fly to the country and court the quiet of nature, but it will fail if it by anything but a means to that inward redemption which will restore us to the simple and the true. But though humanity has wandered from the natural simplicity of the animal world, it is moving toward a higher, divine simplicity. Men of great genius are such because of their spontaneous simplicity. They do not foreign, they are. Lesser minds study style and effect. They wish to cut a striking figure on the stage of the world, and by that unholy wish they are doomed to mediocrity. Said a man to me recently, "I would give 20 years of my life to be able to write an immortal hymn." With such an ambition a man cannot write a hymn. He wants to pose. He is thinking of himself, of his own glory. Before a man can write an immortal hymn, or create an immortal work, he must give, not 20 years of his life to ambition, but to do anything great, he must sing, paint, write, out of 10,000 bitter experiences, 10,000 failures, 10,000 conquests, and 10,000 joys. He must know Gethsemane. He must work with blood and tears. Restraining his intellect and moral powers, and returning to simplicity, a man becomes great. He forfeits nothing real. Only the shams are cast aside, revealing the standard gold of character. Where there is sincerity there will always be simplicity, a simplicity of the kind that we see in nature, the beautiful simplicity of truth. Attractiveness is the direct outcome of simplicity. This is seen in the attractiveness of all natural objects, to which we have referred, but in human nature it is manifested as personal influence. Of recent years, certain pseudo-mystics have been advertising to sell the secret of personal magnetism for so many dollars. by which they purport to show vain people how they can make themselves attractive to others by certain occult means, as though attractiveness can be bought and sold, and put on and off like powder and paint. Nor are people who are anxious to be thought attractive likely to become so, for their vanity is a barrier to it. The very desire to be thought attractive is in itself a deception, and it leads to the practice of numerous deceptions. It infers, too, that such people are conscious of lacking the genuine attractions and graces of character, and are on the lookout for a substitute. But there is no substitute for beauty of mind and strength of character. Attractiveness, like genius, is lost by being coveted, and possessed by those who are too solid and sincere of character to desire it. There is nothing in human nature, nor talent, nor intellect, nor affection, nor beauty of features, that can compare in attractive power with the soundness of mind and the wholeness of heart which we call sincerity. There is a perennial charm about a sincere man or woman, and they can draw about themselves the best specimens of human nature. There can be no personal charm apart from sincerity. Infatuation there may be, and is, but this is a kind of disease, and is vastly different from the indissoluble bond by which sincere people are attached. Infatuation ends in painful disillusion, but as there is nothing hidden between sincere souls, and they stand upon that solid ground of reality, there is no illusion to be displayed. Leaders among men attract by the power of their sincerity, and even if a man's intellect may be great, he can never be a permanent leader and guide of men unless he be sincere. For a time he may sail jauntily upon the stream of popularity and believe himself secure, but it is only that he may shortly fall the lower in popular odium. He cannot long deceive the people with his painted front. They will soon look behind and find of what spurious stuff he is made. He is like a woman with a painted face. She thinks she is admired for her complexion, but all know it is paint and despise her for it. She has one admirer, herself, and the hell of limitation to which the insincere commit themselves is the hell of self-admiration. Sincere people do not think of themselves, of their talent, their genius, their virtue, or their beauty. Because they are so unconscious of themselves, they attract all, and win their confidence, affection, and esteem. Penetration belongs to the sincere. All shams are unveiled in their presence. All stimulators are transparent to the searching eye of the sincere man. With one clear glance he sees through all their flimsy pretenses. He who has rid his heart of all falseness, and entertains only that which is true, has gained the power to distinguish the false from the true in others. He is not deceived who is not self-deceived. As men, looking around on objects of nature, infallibly distinguish them as snake, bird, horse, tree, rose, and so on, so the sincere man distinguishes the variety of characters. He perceives in a movement, a look, a word, an act, the nature of the man, and acts accordingly. He is on his guard without being suspicious. He is prepared for the pretender without being mistrustful. He acts from positive knowledge, and not from negative suspicion. Men are open to him, and he reads their contents. His penetrative judgment pierces to the center of actions. His direct and unequivocal conduct strengthens in others the good and shames the bad, and he is a staff of strength to those who have not yet attained to his soundness of heart and head. Power goes with penetration. An understanding of the nature of actions is accompanied with the power to meet and deal with all actions in the right and best way. Knowledge is always power, but knowledge of the nature of actions is superlative power, and he who possesses it becomes a presence to all hearts, and modifies their actions for good. Long after his bodily presence has passed away, he is still a moulding force in the world, and is a spiritual reality working subtly in the minds of men, and shaping them towards sublime ends. At first his power is local and limited, but the circle of righteousness which he has set moving continues to extend and extend further till it embraces the whole world and all men are influenced by it. The sincere man stamps his character upon all that he does, and also upon all people with whom he comes in contact. He speaks a word in season, and someone is impressed. The influence is communicated to another and another, and presently some despairing soul 10,000 miles away hears it and is restored. Such a power is prosperity in itself, and its worth is not to be valued in coin. Money cannot purchase the priceless jewels of character, but labor and right doing can, and he who makes himself sincere, who acquires a robust soundness through his entire being, will become a man of singular success and rare power. Such is the strong pillar of sincerity. Its supporting power is so great that once it is completely erected, the temple of prosperity is secure. Its walls will not crumble, its rafters will not decay, its roof will not fall in. It will stand while the man lives, and when he has passed away, it will continue to afford a shelter and a home for others through many generations. End of Chapter 7. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 8 of 8 Pillars of Prosperity by James Allen. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 8. 7th Pillar. Impartiality. To get rid of prejudice is a great achievement. Prejudices pile obstacles in a man's way, obstacles to health, success, happiness, and prosperity, so that he is continually running up against imaginary enemies, who, when prejudice is removed, are seen to be a friend. Life, indeed, is a sort of obstacle race to the man of prejudice, a race wherein the obstacles cannot be negotiated, and the goal is not reached, whereas to the impartial man, life is a day's walk in a pleasant country, with refreshment and rest at the end of the day. To acquire impartiality, a man must remove that innate egotism which prevents him from seeing anything from any point of view other than his own. A great task, truly, but a notable one, and one that can be well begun now, even if it cannot be finished. Truth can remove mountains, and prejudice is a range of mental mountains beyond which the partisan does not see, and of which he does not believe there is any beyond. These mountains removed, however, opens to the view the unending vista of mental variety, blended in one glorious picture of light and shade, of color and tone, gladdening beholding eyes. By clinging to stubborn prejudice, what joys are missed, what friends are sacrificed, what happiness is destroyed, and what prospects are blighted. And yet freedom from prejudice is a rare thing. There are few men who are not prejudiced partisans upon the subjects which are of interest to them. One rarely meets a man that will dispassionately discuss his subject from both sides, considering all the facts, and weighting all the evidence, so as to arrive at truth on the matter. Each partisan has his own case to make out. He is not searching for truth, for he is already convinced that his own conclusion is the truth, and that all else is error, but he is defending his own case, and striving for victory. Neither does he attempt to prove that he has the truth by a calm array of facts and evidence, but defends his position with more or less heat and agitation. Prejudice causes a man to form a conclusion, sometimes without any basis of fact or knowledge, and then to refuse to consider anything which does not support that conclusion, and in this way prejudice is a complete barrier to the attainment of knowledge. It binds a man down to darkness and ignorance, and prevents the development of his mind in the highest and noblest directions. More than this, it shuts him out from communion with the best minds, and confines him to the dark and solitary cell of his own egotism. Prejudice is shutting up the mind against the entrance of new light, against the perception of more beauty, against the hearing of diviner music. The partisan clings to his little fleeting flimsy opinion, and thinks it is the greatest thing in the world. He is so in love with his own conclusion, which is his only form of self-love, that he thinks all men ought to agree with him, and he regards men as more or less stupid who do not see as he sees, while he praises the good judgment of those who are with him in his view. Such a man cannot have knowledge, cannot have truth. He is confined to the sphere of opinion, to his own self-created illusions, which is outside the realm of reality. He moves in a kind of self-infatuation, which prevents him from seeing the commonest facts of life, while his own theories, usually more or less groundless, assume in his mind overpowering proportions. He fondly imagines that there is but one side to everything, and that side is his own. There are at least two sides to everything, and he it is who finds the truth in a matter, is he who carefully examines both sides with all freedom from excitement, and without any desire for the predominance of one side over another. In its divisions and controversies, the world at large is like two lawyers defending a case. The counsel for the prosecution presents all the facts which prove his side, while the counsel for the defense presents all the facts which support his contention, and each belittles or ignores, or tries to reason away, the facts of the other. The judge in this case, however, is like the impartial thinker among men. Having listened to all the evidence on both sides, he compares and sifts it so as to form an impartial summing up in the cause of justice. Not that this universal partiality is a bad thing, nor, as in all other extremes, nature here reduces the opposition of conflicting parties to a perfect balance. Moreover, it is a factor in evolution. It stimulates men to think who have not yet developed the power to rouse up vigorous thought at will, and it is a phase through which all men have to pass. But it is only a byway, and a tangled, confused, and painful one, toward the great highway of truth. It is the arc of which impartiality is the perfect round. The partisan sees a portion of the truth, and thinks it the whole, but the impartial thinker sees the whole truth, which includes all sides. It is necessary that we see truth in sections, as it were, until, having gathered up all the parts, we may piece them together and form the perfect circle, and forming such a circle is the attainment of impartiality. The impartial man examines, weighs, and considers, with freedom from prejudice and from likes and dislikes. His one wish is to discover the truth. He abolishes preconceived opinions, and lets facts and evidence speak for themselves. He makes no case to make out for himself, for he knows that truth is unalterable, that his opinions can make no difference to it, and that it can be investigated and discovered. He thereby escapes a vast amount of friction and nervous wear and tear to which the feverish partisan is subject, and in addition he looks directly upon the face of reality, and so becomes tranquil and peaceful. So rare is freedom from prejudice that wherever the impartial thinker may be, he is sure, sooner or later, to occupy a very high position in the estimation of the world, and in the guidance of its destiny. Not necessarily an office in worldly affairs, for that is improbable, but an exalted position in the sphere of influence. There may be such a one now, and he may be a carpenter, a weaver, a clerk. He may be in poverty or in the home of a millionaire. He may be short or tall, or of any complexion. But whatever and wherever he may be, he has, though unknown, already begun to move the world, and one day he will be universally recognized as a new force and creative center in evolution. There was one some 1900 years ago. He was only a poor unlettered carpenter. He was regarded as a madman by his own relatives, and he came to the ignominious end in the eyes of his countrymen. But he sowed the seeds of an influence which has altered the whole world. There was another such in India some 25 centuries ago. He was accomplished, highly educated, was the son of a capitalist and landed proprietor, a petty king. He became a penniless, homeless mendicant, and today 1/3 of the human race worship at his shrine, and are restrained and elevated by his influence. "Beware when the great God lets loose a thinker on this plane," says Emerson, and a man is not a thinker who is bound by prejudice. He is merely the strenuous upholder of an opinion. Every idea must pass through the medium of his particular prejudice, and receive its color, so that dispassionate thinking and impartial judgment are rendered impossible. Such a man sees everything only in its relation, or imagined relation, to his opinion, whereas the thinker sees things as they are. The man who has so purified his mind of prejudice and of all imperfections of egotism as to be able to look directly upon reality has reached the acme of power. He holds it in his hands, as it were, the vastest influence, and he will wield this power whether he knows it or not. It will be inseparable from his life, and will go from him as perfume from the flower. It will be in his words, his deeds, in his bodily postures and the motions of his mind, even in his silence and the stillness of his frame. Wherever he goes, even though he should fly to the desert, he will not escape this lofty destiny, for a great thinker is the center of the world. By him all men are held in their orbits, and all thought gravitates toward him. The true thinker lives above and beyond the seething whirlpool of passion in which mankind is engulfed. He is not swayed by personal consideration, for he has grasped the importance of impersonal principles, and thus being a non-combatant in the clashing warfare of egotistic desires, he can, from the vantage point of an impartial but not indifferent watcher, see both sides equally, and grasp the cause and meaning of the fray. Not only the great teachers, but the greatest figures in literature are those who are free from prejudice, who, like true mirrors, affect things impartially. Such are Whitman, Shakespeare, Balzac, Emerson, Homer. These minds are not local, but universal. Their attitude is cosmic and not personal. They contain within themselves all things and beings, all worlds and laws. They are the gods who guide the race, and who will bring it at last out of its fever of passion and into their own serene land. The true thinker is the greatest of men, and his destiny is the most exalted. The altogether impartial mind has reached the divine, and it basks in the full daylight of reality. The 4 great elements of impartiality are: 1. Justice. 2. Patience. 3. Calmness. 4. Wisdom. Justice is the giving and receiving of equal values. What is called striking a hard bargain is a kind of theft. It means that the purchaser gives value for only a portion of his purchase, the remainder being appropriated as clear gain. The seller also encourages it by closing the bargain. The just man does not try to gain an advantage. He considers the true values of things, and molds his transactions in accordance therewith. He does not let "what will pay" come before "what is right," for he knows that what is right pays best in the end. He does not seek his own benefit to the disadvantage of another, for he knows that a just action benefits, equally and fully, both parties to a transaction. If one man's loss is another man's gain, it is only that the balance may be adjusted later on. Unjust gains cannot lead to prosperity, but are sure to bring failure. A just man could no more take from another an unjust gain by what is called a smart transaction than he could take it by picking his pocket. he would regard the one as dishonest as the other. The bargaining spirit in business is not the true spirit of commerce. It is the selfish and thieving spirit, which wants to get something for nothing. The upright man purges his business of all bargaining, and builds it on the more dignified basis of justice. He supplies a good article at its right price, and does not alter. He does not soil his hands with any business which is tainted in fraud. His goods are genuine, and they are properly priced. Customers who try to beat down a tradesman in their purchases are degrading themselves. Their practice assumes one or both of two things, namely, that either the tradesman is dishonest and is overcharging, a low and suspicious attitude of mind, or that they are eager to cajole him out of his profit, an equally base attitude, and so benefit by his loss. The practice of bearing down is altogether a dishonest one, and the people who pursue it most assiduously are those who complain most of being imposed on, and this is not surprising, seeing that they themselves are all the time trying to impose on others. On the other hand, the tradesman who is anxious to get all he can out of his customers, irrespective of justice and the right value of things, is a kind of robber, and is slowly poisoning his success, for his deeds will assuredly come home to him in the form of financial ruin. Said a man of 50 to me the other day, "I have just discovered that all my life I have been paying 50% more for everything than I ought to." A just man cannot feel that he has ever paid too much for anything, for he does not close with any transaction which he considers unjust. But if a man is eager to get everything at half price, then he will always be meanly and miserably mourning that he is paying double for everything. The just man is glad to pay full value for everything, whether in giving or receiving, and his mind is untroubled and his days are full of peace. Let a man avoid all meanness, and strive to be ever more and more perfectly just, for if he be not just, he can be neither honest nor generous nor manly, but is a kind of disgusted thief, trying to get all he can, and give back as little as possible. Let him eschew all bargaining, and teach bargainers a better way, by conducting his business with that exalted dignity which commands a large and meritorious success. Patience is the brightest jewel in the character of the impartial man. Not a particular patience with a particular thing, like a girl with her needlework, or a boy building his toy engine, but an unswerving considerateness, a sweetness of disposition at all times and under the most trying circumstances, an unchangeable and gentle strength, which no trial can mar and no persecution can break. A rare possession, it is true, and one not to be expected for a long time yet from the bulk of mankind, but a virtue that can be reached by a degree, and even a partial patience will work wonders in a man's life and affairs, as a confirmed impatience will work all devastation. The irascible man is courting speedy disaster, for who will care to deal with a man who is continually going off like ground powder when some small spark of complaint or criticism falls upon him? Even his friends will one by one desert him, for who would court the company of a man who rudely assaults him with an impatient and fiery tongue over every little difference or misunderstanding? A man must work to wisely control himself, and to learn the beautiful lessons of patience, if he is to be highly prosperous, and if he is to be a man of use and power. He must learn to think of others, to act for their good, and not alone for himself, to be considerate, forbearing, and long-suffering. He must study how to have a heart at peace with men who differ from him on those things which he regards as most vital. He must avoid quarreling as he would avoid drinking a deadly poison. Discords from without will be continually overtaking him, but he must fortify himself against them. He must study how to bring harmonies out of them by the exercise of patience. Strife is common. It pains the heart and distorts the mind. Patience is rare. It enriches the heart and beautifies the mind. Every cat can spit and fume. It requires no effort, but only a looseness of behavior. It takes a man to keep his mornings through all events, and to be painstaking and patient with the shortcomings of humanity. But patience wins. As soft water wears away the hardest rock, so patience overcomes all opposition. It gains the hearts of men. It conquers and controls. Calmness accompanies patience. It is a great and glorious quality. It is the peaceful haven of emancipated souls after their long wanderings on the tempest river ocean of passion. It makes the man who has suffered much, endured much, experienced much, and has finally conquered. A man cannot be impartial who is not calm. Excitement, prejudice, and partiality spring from disturbed passions. When personal feeling is thwarted, it rises and seethes like a stream of water that is dammed. The calm man avoids this disturbance by directing his feeling from the personal to the impersonal channel. He thinks and feels for others as well as for himself. He sets the same value on other men's opinions as his own. If he regards his work as important, he sees also that the work of other men is equally important. He does not contend for the merit of his own against the demerit of that of others. He is not overthrown, like Humpty Dumpty, with a sense of self-importance. He has put aside egotism for truth, and he perceives the right relations of things. He has conquered irritability, and has come to see that there is nothing in itself that should cause irritation. As well be irritable with a pansy because it is not a rose, as with a man because he does not see as you see. Minds differ, and the calm man recognizes the difference as facts in human nature. The calm, impartial man is not only the happiest man, he also has all his powers at his command. He is sure, deliberate, executive, and swiftly and easily accomplishes in silence what the irritable man slowly and laboriously toils through with much work. His mind is purified, poised, concentrated, and ready at any moment to be directed upon a given work with unerring power. In the calm mind all contradictions are reconciled, and there is a radiant gladness and perpetual peace. As Emerson puts it, calmness is joy fixed and habitual. One should not confound indifference with calmness, for it is at the opposite extreme. Indifference is lifeless, while calmness is growing life and full-orbed power. The calm man has partially or entirely conquered self, and having successfully battled with the selfishness within, he knows how to meet and overcome it successfully in others. In any moral contest, the calm man is always the victor. So long as he remains calm, defeat is impossible. Self-control is better than riches and calmness in a perpetual benediction. Wisdom abides with the impartial man. Her counsel guides him, her wings shield him, she leads him along pleasant ways to happy destinations. Wisdom is many-sided. The wise man adapts himself to others. He acts for their good, yet never violates the moral virtues or the principles of right conduct. The foolish man cannot adapt himself to others. He acts for himself only, and continually violates the moral virtues and the principles of right conduct. There is a degree of wisdom in every act of impartiality, and once a man has touched and experienced the impartial zone, he can recover it again and again, until he finally establishes himself in it. Every thought, word, and act of wisdom tells on the world at large, for it is fraught with greatness. Wisdom is a well of knowledge and a spring of power. It is profound and comprehensive, and so it is exact and all-inclusive as to embrace the smallest details. In its spacious greatness it does not overlook the small. The wise mind is like the world. It contains all things in their proper place and order, and is not burdened thereby. Like the world also, it is free, and unconscious of any restrictions. yet it never loses, is never erring, is never sinful and repentant. Wisdom is the steady, grown-up being of whom folly was the crying infant. It has outgrown the weakness and dependence, the errors and punishments of infantile ignorance, and is erect, poised, strong, and serene. The understanding mind needs no external support. It stands of itself on the firm ground of knowledge, not book knowledge, but ripened experience. It has passed through all minds, and therefore knows them. It has traveled with all hearts, and knows their journeying in joy and sorrow. When wisdom touches a man, he is lifted up and transfigured. He becomes a new being, with new aims and powers, and he inhabits a new universe, in which to accomplish a new and glorious destiny. Such is the Pillar of Impartiality, which adds its massive strength and incomparable grace to support and beautify the Temple of Prosperity. End of Chapter 8. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 9 of 8 Pillars of Prosperity by James Allen. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 9. 8th Pillar. Self-Reliance. Every young man ought to read Emerson's essay on self-reliance. It is the manliest, most virile essay that was ever penned. It is calculated to cure alike those two mental maladies common to youth, namely, self-deprecation and self-conceit. It is almost as sure to reveal to the prig the smallness and emptiness of his vanity, as it is to show the bashful man the weakness and ineffectuality of his diffidence. It is a new revelation of manly dignity, as much a revelation as any that was vouchsafed to ancient seer and prophet, and perhaps a more practical, eminently suited to his mechanic age, coming as it does from a modern prophet of a new type and called in a new race, and its chief merit is its powerfully tonic quality. Let not self-reliance be confounded with self-conceit, for as high and excellent as the one, just so low and worthless as the other. There cannot be anything mean in self-reliance, while in self-conceit there cannot be anything great. The man that never says no when questioned on subjects of which he is entirely ignorant, to avoid, as he imagines, being thought ignorant, but confidently puts forth guesses and assumptions as knowledge, will be known for his ignorance, and ill esteemed for his added conceit. An honest confession of ignorance will command respect, where a conceited assumption of knowledge will elicit contempt. The timid, apologetic man, who seems almost afraid to live, who fears that he will do something not in the approved way, and will subject himself to ridicule, is not a full man. He must imitate others, and has no independent action. He needs that self-reliance which will compel him to fall back on his own initiative, and so become a new example instead of the slavish follower of an old one. As for ridicule, he who is hurt by it is no man. The shafts of mockery and sarcasm cannot pierce the strong armor of the self-reliant man. They cannot reach the invincible citadel of his honest heart to sting or wound it. The sharp arrows of irony may rain upon him, but he laughs as they are deflected by the strong breastplate of his confidence, and fall harmless about him. Trust thyself, says Emerson. Every heart vibrates to that iron string. Throughout the ages, men have so far leaned, and do still lean, upon external makeshifts, instead of standing upon their own native simplicity and original dignity. The few who have had the courage so to stand have been singled out and elevated as heroes, and he is indeed the true hero who has the hardihood to let his nature speak for itself, who has that strong mettle that enables him to stand upon his own intrinsic worth. It is true that the candidate for such heroism must endure the test of strength. He must not be shamed from his ground by the bugbears of the initiate conventionalist. He must not fear for his own reputation or position, or for his standing in the church or his prestige in local society. He must learn to act and live as independently of these considerations as he does of the current fashions in the antipodes. Yet when he has endured this test, and standard and odium have failed to move or afflict him, he has become a man indeed, one that society will have to reckon with and finally accept on his own terms. Sooner or later all men will turn to the guidance of the self-reliant man, and while the best minds do not make a prop of him, they respect and value his work and worth, and recognize his place among the goods that have gone before. It must not be thought an indication of self-reliance to scorn to learn. Such an attitude is born of a stubborn superciliousness which has the elements of weakness and is prophetic of a fall, rather than the elements of strength and the promise of high achievement which are characteristic of self-reliance. Pride and vanity must not be associated with self, rests upon incidentals and appurtenancies, on money, clothing, property, prestige, position, and these lost, all is lost. Self-reliance rests upon essentials and principles, on worth, probity, purity, sincerity, character, truth, and whatever may be lost is of little account, for these are never lost. Pride tries to hide its ignorance by ostentation and assumption, and is unwilling to be thought a learner in any direction. It stands, during its little fleeting day, on ignorance and appearance, and the higher it is lifted up today, the lower it will be cast down tomorrow. Self-reliance has nothing to hide, and is willing to learn, and while there can be no humility where pride is, self-reliance and humility are compatible. Nay, more, they are complementary, and the sublime form of self-reliance is only found associated with the profoundest humility. Extremes meet, says Emerson, and there is no better example than the haughtiness of humility. No aristocrat, no prince born to the purple, can begin to compare with the self-respect of the saint. Why is he so lowly? But that he knows that he can well afford it, resting on the largeness of the God in him. It was Buddha who, in this particular, said, "Those who, either now or after I am dead, shall be a lamp unto themselves, relying upon themselves only, and not relying upon any external help, but holding fast to the truth as their lamp, and seeking their salvation in the truth alone, shall not look for assistance to any one beside themselves. It is they among my disciples who shall reach the very topmost height, but they must be willing to learn." In this saying, the repeated insistence on the necessity for relying upon oneself alone, coupled with the final exhortation to be eager to learn, is the wisest utterance on self-reliance that I know. In it, the great teacher comprehends that perfect balance between self-trust and humility which the man of truth must acquire. Self-trust is the essence of heroism. All great men are self-reliant, and we should use them as teachers and exemplars, not as props and perambulators. A great man comes who leans upon no one, but stands alone in the solitary dignity of truth, and straightway the world begins to lean upon him, begins to make him an excuse for spiritual indolence and a destructive self-abasement. Better than cradling our vices in the strength of the great would be to newly light our virtues at their luminous lamp. If we rely upon the light of another, darkness will overtake us, but if we rely upon our own light, we have to but keep it burning. We may draw light from another and communicate with it, but to think it sufficient while our own lamp is rusting is neglect, is shortly to find ourselves abandoned in darkness. Our own inner light is the light which never fails us. What is the inner light of the Quakers but another name for self-reliance? We should stand upon what we are, not upon what another is. But I am so small and poor, you may say. Well, stand upon that smallness, and presently it will become great. A babe's needs are to suckle and cling, but not so a man. Henceforth he goes upon his own limbs. Men pray to God to put their hands that which they are framed to reach out for, to put into mouth the food for which they should strenuously labor. But men will outgrow this spiritual infancy. The time will come when men will no more pay a priest to pray for them and preach to them. Man's chief trouble is a mistrust of himself, so that the self-trusting man becomes a rare and singular spectacle. If a man look upon himself as a worm, what can come out of him but an ineffectual wriggling? Truly, he that humbleth shall be exalted, but not he that degradeth himself. A man should see himself as he is, and if there is any unworthiness in him, he should get rid of it, and retain and rely upon that which is of worth. A man is only debased when he debases himself. He is exalted when he lives an exalted life. Why should a man, with ceaseless iterations, draw attention to his fallen nature? There is a false humility which takes a sort of pride in vice. If one has fallen, it is that he may rise and be the wiser for it. If a man falls into a ditch, he does not lie there and call upon every passer-by to mark his fallen state. He gets up and goes on his way with greater care. So if one has fallen into the ditch of vice, let him rise and be cleansed, and go on his way rejoicing. There is not a sphere in life wherein a man's influence and prosperity will not be considerably increased by even a measure of self-reliance, and to the teacher, whether secular or religious, to organizers, managers, overseers, and in all positions of control and command, it is an indispensable equipment. The four grand qualities of self-reliance are: 1. Decision. 2. Steadfastness. 3. Dignity. 4. Independence. Decision makes a man strong. A man who is to play a speaking part, however small, in the drama of life, must be decisive and know what he is about. Whatever he doubts, he must not doubt his power to act. He must know his part in life, and put all energy into it. He must have some solid ground of knowledge from which to work, and stand securely on that. It may only be the price and quality of stock, but he must know his work thoroughly, and know that he knows it. He must be ready at any time to answer for himself when his duty is impugned. He should be so well grounded upon his particular practice as to not be affected with hesitation on any point or in any emergence. It is a true saying that the man that hesitates is lost. No one believes in him who does not believe in himself, who doubts, halts, and wavers, and cannot extricate himself from the tangled threads of two courses. Who would deal with a tradesman who did not know the price of his own goods, or was not sure where to find them? A man must know his business. If he does not know his own, who shall instruct him? He must be able to give a good report of the truth that is in him. He must have that touch which skill and knowledge can only impart. Certainty is a great element in self-reliance. To have weight, a man must have some truth to impart, and all skill is a communication of truth. He must speak with authority, and not as the scribes. He must master something, and know he has mastered it, so as to deal with it lucidly and understandingly, in the way of a master, and not to remain always as an apprentice. Indecision is a disintegrating factor. A minute's faltering may turn back the current course of success. Men who are afraid to decide quickly for fear of making a mistake nearly always make a mistake when they do act. The quickest in thought and action are less liable to blunder, and it is better to act with decision and make a mistake than to act with indecision and make a mistake. For in the former case there is but error, but in the latter weakness is added to error. A man should be decided always, both where he knows and where he does not know. He should be as ready to say no as to say yes, as quick to acknowledge his ignorance as to impart his knowledge. If he stands upon fact, and acts from the simple truth, he will find no room for halting between two opinions. Make up your mind quickly, and act decisively. Better still, have a mind that is already made up, and then the decision will be instinctive and spontaneous. Steadfastness arises in the mind that is quick to decide. It is indeed a final decision upon the best course of conduct and the best path of life. It is the vow of the soul to stand firmly by its principles, whatever betide. It is neither necessary nor unnecessary that there be any written or spoken vow, for unswerving loyalty to a fixed principle is the spirit of all vows. The man without fixed principles will not accomplish much. Expediency is the quagmire in a thorny waste, in which a man is continually sticking in the shifting mud of his own moral looseness, and is pricked and scratched with the thorns of his own self-created disappointments. One must have some solid ground on which to stand among one's fellows. He cannot stand on the bog of concession. Shiftiness is a vice of weakness, and the vices of weakness do more to undermine character and influence than the vices of strength. The man that is vicious, through excess of animal strength, takes a shorter cut to truth. When one understands that power is adaptable to both good and bad ends, it will not surprise him that the drunkards and harlots should reach the kingdom of heaven before the diplomatic religionists. They are at least thorough in the course which they have adopted, vile though it may be, and thoroughness is strength. It only needs that strength to be turned from bad to good, and lo! the loathed sinner has become the lofty saint. A man should have a firm, fixed, determined mind. He should decide upon those principles which are best to stand by in all issues, and which will most safely guide him through the maze of conflicting opinions, and inspire him with unflinching courage in the battle of life. Having adopted his principles, they should be more to him than gain or happiness, more even than life itself, and if he never deserts them, he will find that they will never desert him. They will defend him from all enemies, deliver him safely from all dangers, light his pathway through all darkness and difficulties. They will be to him a light in darkness, a resting place from sorrow, and a refuge from the conflicts of the world. Dignity clothes, as with a majestic garment, the steadfast mind. He who is as unyielding as a bar of steel when he is expected to compromise with evil, and as supple as a willow wand in adapting himself to that which is good, carries about with him a dignity that calms and uplifts others by its presence. The unsteady mind, the mind that is not anchored to any fixed principles, that is stubborn where its own desires are threatened, and yielding where its own moral welfare is at stake, has no gravity, no balance, no calm composure. The man of dignity cannot be downtrodden and enslaved, because he has ceased to tread upon and enslave himself. He at once disarms, with a look, a word, a wise and suggestive silence, any attempt to demean him. His mere presence is a wholesome reproof to the flippant and the unseemly, while it is a rock of strength to the lover of the good. But the chief reason why the dignified man commands respect is, not only that he is supremely self-respecting, but that he graciously treats all others with a due esteem. Pride loves itself, and treats those beneath it with supercilious contempt, for love of self and contempt for others are always found together in equal degrees, so that the greater the self-love, the greater the arrogance. True dignity arises, not from self-love, but from self-sacrifice, that is, from unbiased adherence to a fixed central principle. The dignity of the judge arises from the fact that in the performance of his duty he sets aside all personal consideration and stands solely upon the law. His little personality, impermanent and fleeting, becomes nothing, while the law, enduring and majestic, becomes all. Should a judge, in deciding a case, forget the law, and fall into personal feeling and prejudice, his dignity would be gone. So the man of a stately, pure character stands upon the divine law, and not upon personal feeling, for immediately when a man gives way to passion he has sacrificed dignity. and takes his place as one of the multitude of the unwise and uncontrolled. Every man will have composure and dignity in the measure that he acts from a fixed principle. It only needs that the principle be right, and therefore unassailable. So long as a man abides by such a principle, and does not waver or descend into the personal element, attacking passions, prejudices, and interests, however powerful, will be weak and ineffectual before the conquerable strength of an incorruptible principle, and will at last yield their combined and unseemly confusion to his single and majestic right. Independence is the birthright of the strong and well-controlled man. All men love and strive for liberty. All men aspire to some sort of freedom. A man should labor for himself or for the community. Unless he is a cripple, a chronic invalid, or is mentally irresponsible, he should be ashamed to depend upon others for all he has, giving nothing in return. If one imagines that such a condition is freedom, let him know that it is one of the lowest forms of slavery. The time will come when, to be a drone in the human hive, even, as matters are now, a respectable drone and not a poor tramp, will be a public disgrace, and will no longer be respectable. Independence, freedom, glorious liberty come through labor and not from idleness, and the self-reliant man is too strong, too honorable, too upright to depend upon others, like a sucking babe, for his support. He earns with hand or brain the right to live as becomes a man and a citizen, and thus he does whether born rich or poor, for riches are no excuse for idleness. Rather they are an opportunity to labor, with the rare faculties which they afford, for the good of the community. Only he who is self-supporting is free, self-reliant, and independent. Thus is the nature of the 8 pillars explained. On what foundation they rest, the manner of their building, their ingredients, the fourfold nature of the material of which each is composed, what positions they occupy, and how they support the temple, all may now build, and he who knew perfectly may rejoice in this systematization and simplification of the moral order and prosperity. Let us now consider the temple itself, that we may know the might of its pillars, the strength of its walls, the endurance of its roof, the architectural beauty and perfection of the whole. End of chapter 9. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 10 of 8 Pillars of Prosperity by James Allen. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 10. The Temple of Prosperity. The reader who has followed the course of this book with a view to obtaining information on the details of money-making, business transactions, profit and loss in various undertakings, prices, markets, agreements, contracts, and other matters connected with the achievement of prosperity, will have noted an entire absence of any instruction on these matters of detail. The reason for this is fourfold, namely, first, details cannot stand alone, but are powerless to build up anything unless intelligently related to principles. Second, details are infinite, and are ceaselessly changing, while principles are few, and are eternal and unchangeable. Third, principles are the coherent factors in all details, regulating and harmonizing them, so that to have right principles is to be right in all the subsidiary details. Fourth, a teacher of truth in any direction must adhere rigidly to principles, and must not allow himself to be drawn away from them into the ever-changing maze of private particulars and personal details, because such particulars and details have only a local right, and are not necessary for certain individuals, while principles are universally right, and are necessary for all men. He who grasps the principles of this book so as to be able to intelligently practice them will be able to reach the heart of this fourfold reason. The details of a man's affairs are important, but they are his details, or the details of his particular branch of industry, and all outside that branch are not concerned with them. But moral principles are the same for all men. They are applicable to all conditions, and govern all particulars. The man who works from fixed principles does not need to harass himself over the complications of numerous details. He will grasp, as it were, the entire details in one single thought, and will see them through and through, illumined by the light of the principle to which they stand related, and this without friction, and with freedom from anxiety and strain. Until principles are grasped, details are regarded and dealt with as primary matters, and so viewed that they lead to innumerable complications and confused issues. In the light of principles, they are seen to be secondary facts, and so seen, all difficulties connected with them are at once overcome and annulled by a reference to principles. He who is involved in numerous details, without the regulating and synthesizing element of principles, is like one lost in a forest, with no direct path along which to walk amid the mass of objects. He is swallowed up by the details, while the man of principles contains all details within himself. He stands outside them, as it were, and grasps them in their entirety, while the other man can only see the few that are nearest to him at the time. All things are contained in principles. They are the laws of things, and all things observe their own law. It is an error to view things apart from their nature. Details are the letter of which principles are the spirit. It is as true in art, science, literature, commerce, as in religion, that the letter killeth, the spirit of giveth life. The body of a man, with its wonderful combination of parts, is important, but only in its relation to the spirit. The spirit being withdrawn, the body is useless and is put away. The body of a business, with its complicated details, is important, but only in its relation to the vivifying principles by which it is controlled. These withdrawn, the business will perish. To have the body of prosperity, its material presentation, we must first have the spirit of prosperity. The spirit of prosperity is the quick spirit of moral virtue. Moral blindness prevails. Men see money, property, pleasure, leisure, etc., and mistaking them for prosperity, strive to get them for their own enjoyment, but when obtained, find no enjoyment in them. Prosperity is at first a spirit, an attitude of mind, a moral power, a life, which manifests outwardly in the form of plenty, happiness, and joy. Just as a man cannot become a genius by writing poems, essays, and plays, but must develop and acquire the soul of genius, then the writing will follow as effect to cause. So one cannot become prosperous by hoarding up money and by gaining property and possessions, but must develop and acquire the soul of virtue, when the material accessories will follow as effect to cause. For the spirit of virtue is the spirit of joy, and contains within itself all abundance, all satisfaction, all fullness of life. There is no joy in money. There is no joy in property. There is no joy in material accumulations, or in any material things of itself. These things are dead and lifeless. The spirit of joy must be in the man, or it is nowhere. He must have within him the capacity for happiness. He must have the wisdom to know how to use things, and not merely hoard them. He must possess them, and not be possessed by them. They must be dependent upon him, and not he upon them. They must follow him, and not he be forever running after them. And they will inevitably follow him, if he has the moral elements within to which they are related. Nothing is absent from the kingdom of heaven. It contains all good, true, and necessary things. And the kingdom of God is within you. I know rich people who are supremely happy, because they are generous, magnanimous, pure, and joyful. But I also know rich people who are very miserable, and these are they who look to money and possessions for their happiness, and have not developed the spirit of good and of joy within themselves. How can it be said of a wretched man that he is prosperous, even if his income be £10,000 a year? There must be fitness and harmony and satisfaction in a true prosperity. When a rich man is happy, it is that he brought the spirit of happiness to his riches, and not that the riches brought happiness to him. He is a full man, with full material advantages and responsibilities, while the miserable rich man is an empty man, looking to riches for that fullness of life which can only be evolved from within. Thus prosperity resolves itself into a moral capacity, and in wisdom to rightfully use and lawfully enjoy the material things which are inseparable from our earthly life. If one would be free without, let him first be free within, for if he be bound in a spirit by weakness, selfishness, or vice, how can the possession of money liberate him? Will it not rather become in his hands a ready instrument by which to further enslave himself? The visible effects of prosperity, then, must not be considered alone, but in their relation to the mental and moral cause. There is a hidden foundation to every building. The fact that it continues to stand is proof of that. There is a hidden foundation to every form of established success. Its permanence proves that it is so. Prosperity stands on the foundation of character, and there is not, in all the wide universe, any other foundation. True wealth is welfare, well-being, soundness, wholesomeness, and happiness. The wretched rich are not truly wealthy. They are merely encumbered with money, luxury, and leisure as instruments of self-torture. By their possessions they are self-cursed. The moral man is ever blessed, ever happy, and his life, viewed as a whole, is always a success. To these there is no exception, for whatever failures he may have in detail, the finished work of his life will be sound, whole, complete, and thorough, and he will have a quiet conscience, an honorable name, and all manifold blessings which are inseparable from richness of character. And without this moral richness, financial riches will not avail or satisfy. Let us briefly recapitulate, and again view the 8 pillars in their strength and splendor. Energy, rousing oneself up to strenuous and unremitting exertion in the accomplishment of one's task. Economy, concentration of power, the concentration of both capital and character, the latter being mental capital, and therefore of the utmost importance. Integrity, unswerving honesty, keeping inviolate all promises, agreements, and contracts, apart from all considerations of loss or gain. System, making all details subservient to order, and thereby relieving the memory and the mind of superfluous work and strain by reducing many to one. Sympathy, magnanimity, generosity, gentleness, and tenderness, being open-handed, free, and kind. Sincerity, being sound and whole, robust and true, and therefore not being one person in public and another in private, and not assuming good actions openly while doing bad actions in secret. Impartiality, justice, not striving for self, but weighing both sides, and acting in accordance with equity. Self-reliance, looking to oneself only for strength and support, by standing on principles which are fixed and invincible, and not relying upon outward things, which at any moment may be snatched away. How can any life be other than successful which is built on these 8 pillars? Their strength is such that no physical or intellectual strength can compare with it, and to have built on all the 8 perfectly would render a man invincible. It will be found, however, that men are often strong in one or several of these qualities, and weak in others, and it is this weak element that invites failure. It is foolish, for instance, to attribute a man's failure in business to his honesty. It is impossible for honesty to produce failure. The cause of failure must be looked for in some other direction, in the lack, and not the possession, of some good necessary quality. Moreover, such attribution of failure to honesty is a slur on the integrity of commerce, and a false indictment of those men, numerous enough, who are honorably engaged in trade. A man may be strong in energy, economy, and system, but comparatively weak in the other five. Such a man will just fail of complete success by lacking one of the four corner pillars, namely, integrity. His temple will give way at that weak corner, for the four pillars must be well built before the temple of prosperity can stand secure. They are the first qualities to be acquired in a man's moral evolution, and without them the second four cannot be possessed. Again, if a man be strong in the first three, and lack the fourth, the absence of order will invite confusion and disaster into his affairs, and so on with any partial combination of these qualities, especially the first four, for the second four are of so lofty a character that at present men cannot but possess them, with rare exception, in a more or less imperfect form. The man of the world, then, who wishes to secure an abiding success in any branch of commerce, or in any one of the many lines of industry in which men are commonly engaged, must build into his character, by practice, the first four moral pillars. By these fixed principles he must regulate his thought, his conduct, and his affairs, consulting them in every difficulty, making every detail serve them, and above all, never deserting them under any circumstance, to gain some personal advantage or to save some personal trouble, for so to desert them is to make one's self vulnerable to the disintegrating elements of evil, and to become assailable to accusations from others. He who so abides by these four principles will achieve a full measure of success in his own particular work, whatever it may be. His temple of prosperity will be well built and well supported, and will stand secure. The perfect practice of these four principles is within the scope of all men who are willing to study them with that object in view, for they are so simple and plain that a child could grasp their meaning, and their perfection in conduct does not call for an unusual degree of self-sacrifice, though it demands some self-denial and personal discipline, without which there can be no success in this world of action. The second four pillars, however, are principles of a more profound nature, are more difficult to understand and practice, and call from the highest degree of self-sacrifice and self-effacement. Few, at present, can reach the detachment from the personal element which their perfect practice demands, but the few who accomplish this in any marked degree will vastly enlarge their powers and enrich their life, and will adorn their temple of prosperity with a singular and attractive beauty which will gladden and elevate all beholders long after they have passed away. But those who are beginning to build their temple of prosperity in accordance with the teaching of this book must bear in mind that a building requires time to erect, and must be patiently raised up, brick by brick and stone by stone, and the pillars must be firmly fixed and cemented, and labor and care will be needed to make the whole complete. And the building of this inner mental temple is none the less real and substantial because invisible and noiseless, for in the raising up of his, as in the raising of Solomon's temple, which was 7 years in building, it can be said, there was neither hammer nor axe, nor any tool of iron heard in the house, while it was in the building. Even so, O reader, construct thy character, raise up the house of thy life, build up thy temple of prosperity. Be not as the foolish who rise and fall upon the uncertain flux of selfish desires, but be at peace in thy labor, crown thy career with completeness, and so be numbered among the wise who, without uncertainty, build upon a fixed and secure foundation, even upon the principles of truth, which endure forever. End of chapter 10. Recording by Andrea Fiore. www.andreafiore.com Name. End of 8 Pillars of Prosperity by James Allen.